Good morning. Welcome to Basic Black 101 from the Grand Rapids African American Museum and Archives. And I'm George Byard, your host. And this class, we have the honor of having Joyce Daniels here to talk about genealogy and tracing your roots. Joyce has been doing genealogy for a good while and is one of our area experts on the subject. And so without further ado, I'd like you to meet Joyce Daniels.
Good morning, George, and good morning those that are going to be watching this. My name again is Joyce Daniels. I've been doing genealogy a little over 20 years. I started genealogy kind of on a fluke, but once I stepped into the mold, it was no turning back. No turning back. Good morning.
Good morning.
So let's get started. Genealogy. What is genealogy? What is genealogy? Genealogy is the study of families. It's the study of family history and the tracing of their lineage. So basically, it's you on paper and where you come from. What's a genealogist? I've asked people, do you know what genealogy is? Do you know what a genealogist is? And they're like, no. Well, it's the person who traces. They put your information under a microscope and they pull out those details. They open up your history so that you know who you are. What prompted those that are watching, I want you to think what prompted your interest to discover your family history. And this is kind of interactive. So if you want to make a comment, please feel free to do that. I'm used to the interactive of live people. So have you want to, is your name is Deborah?
Yes.
Deborah, have you worked with genealogy before?
You know what? I have the luxury of being married to someone who really researches, which is Mr. B right there.
Oh,
That's my wife, Joyce.
I didn't know that. Okay.
But I'll tell you that several years ago, here's what I say, Joyce. I tell everyone, as long as your older relatives are living, please sit down with them and ask them questions. I was fortunate to ask a lot of questions, but I still have more. And now my entire, that previous generation, except for one person who's in California, that previous generation is gone. So everyone in my mother's generation, except for one, an uncle who's in California, and actually he's a cousin, is in California. They have all passed away. My father lost his last first cousin 2 years ago. And so I don't really have anyone, potentially friends, but even then, it's hard to get in contact with people. So I just really encourage people, if you have older relatives that are still living, to ask those questions. That's just been my experience.
Okay.
And what I know now is, and the other thing is, keep track of the paper you wrote it down on, right? Because
We're going to talk about that too. We're going to talk about that. You bring up very interesting facts. Very interesting facts, and it's kind of trial and error.
Yes.
I wish I had some of the things that you mentioned. I wish I had known that when I began. Actually, when I began doing genealogy, my mom and her 4 sisters actually would do reunions because of Alex Haley. I think most of us kind of, was like, oh, let's find out ours. And at that time, we did not have access to the internet. And so it was word of mouth. or because you didn't necessarily have the money to travel back down to Tennessee or wherever to go
Mhm.
through the courts and go through, it just made it sound so it would be a burden financially.
Mhm.
So what my mom and her sisters did, they sat down one day and they wrote down what each remembered, because
Oh,
even though their father was alive, they were doing their mom's side at that particular point.
okay.
And then their father's side, was such a limited, he didn't really know anything,
Oh,
um, because he had been the baby and he was the boy.
oh, yeah.
And his father died early. So they sat down and they wrote down what what each remembered.
Mm,
And we had our family reunions every few years.
mhm,
And when my mom passed away in 2000, going through her things, because I was her PR,
mhm.
I found this piece of paper that's on the screen, and it's in her
Wow.
handwriting. And it was, and this is actually a copy because the other was so fragile.
Yeah.
But I took this and then I seen on that the library was having a lock-in, and I had never been to a not lock-in. I had never done genealogy. I took my piece of paper and my pencil and a notebook, and I said, I'm going to this, whatever this lock-in is at the Grand
Wow.
Rapids Library.
Wow.
And I went down there and I said, I have this little bit of information. I want to find my family. And I sat down, and George, at that time, it was with Roger. You know who
Oh,
Roger
yeah,
is.
yep, yep, yep.
And Roger has the patience of an ant, but he's such a nice guy. But he sat down and said, blah, 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 blah. I said, okay, now how'd you do that? And
Wow.
as I looked around the room, I was the only one that looked like me.
Yep.
Mm,
And so no
mhm.
one else was going through the same turmoil of
Right,
trying to find out,
right.
without trying to say, little African American girl over here can't find,
Yeah.
some needed information. So I struggled with that. I got a chance to meet some of the society, and I said, you know what? I'm going to join the society, and I'm going to continue with my quest. I don't care if I'm the only one. Then they
Wow.
had a bus trip to Allen Library,
Okay.
Georgette, and we went down there, and I took my piece of paper with me and my notebook, and again, I did the same thing. And but what became perplexing was they would have class, and it's like, come learn your Swedish heritage, come learn your
Oh.
Dutch heritage. This
Mhm,
is this
mhm.
is Grand Rapids. And I said, this
Right.
doesn't fit me. And
Yeah.
so I just continued and kind of learned from there. But
Mhm.
that was my beginning, it, of jumping into the hole of genealogy. And when I say hole, when you do genealogy, you'll know, because
Yeah.
it is unending. I've had
Yeah.
relatives say, well, when are you going to be done with this thing? I
Yeah.
said, yeah, okay, you wait.
Yeah.
It's never
Yeah.
ending,
Yeah.
never ending. Okay,
Miss
I'll move.
Joyce, I actually had a cousin who and I would need to, I know that my brother knows how to get in touch with uh this side.
Mhm.
So my father, and I know this is not about me. I just
No, you're
but
fine.
my father, his people are from Kentucky. And
Okay.
I don't know how far back in Kentucky. So in other words, I don't know if they migrated from like South Carolina and then came
You
there,
know,
but
you do know Kentucky was kind of a border state, and they had slaves there, even though they did not
mm,
purchase slaves there, and they
mm,
traded them there. And some of those slaves owners actually had plantations in the South, but they had homes and summer homes in Kentucky.
wow.
And so a lot
Yeah.
of them got up there that way. So it was Kentucky was, was kind of a iffy state.
Okay.
But they did have slaves. But they couldn't trade them there.
Okay.
Let,
So my
Deb,
oh,
let,
yeah.
let her get on with the program a little bit, then we'll come back and ask her some
Okay.
more questions. Rhonda, welcome to the show.
All right, we'll continue on. Nonetheless, I found this paper and I decided to start digesting it. All right. So now let's get started in genealogy. How do we start? The first thing we do is we collect data. We take that data and we document that data. And then we have to prove that data. And then we have to organize it. So where to begin? We collect the data first, and we collect it orally, and we collect written records. When I say orally, we talk to our families, and we talk to the grandmothers. We talk to, just like what you said, Deborah. We talk to the relatives that we know that are around, and we ask them questions. Um, and then we find things like obituaries. We have this is one of my examples. I attended a family worship center.
Okay. Wow.
We held on to this because this was our church's manual with everything, not manual, but like yearbook. In here is Grand Rapids. This is Grand Rapids. When you're doing history, it's Grand Rapids upside down. But things like this, people hold on to. They hold on to obituaries. They hold on to sometimes mortgages, and sometimes, and before the mortgages would hold history in itself, would hold the deeds, would hold who else owned the house and who owned this, that, or the other. Those are the things. Those are the written records, the oral records of those stories. And I remember the stories my grandmother told me, and it's because she told me. And so they become sentimental, more sentimental, but those stories need to be written down because they become part of collecting the data.
Right. Right.
When it comes to oral history, don't wait. Do not wait. You make the time. You say, I met some relatives. I found out, and I'll go through that, but I met some relatives, and we've met on the phone, and then we're like, oh yeah, we're gonna get together. Do you know how many people say that we're gonna get together, and it never happens? Or it happens too late. You get together and you're going to their funeral, or you're going to and they tell you the stories. They say, oh, I have this, and I have a picture of Uncle George, and I have this, and that goes right with them. And usually their kids or whoever is responsible for their of their things goes in the trash because they don't understand how valuable that is. That is a jewel from your family. So don't wait. But when you do talk to them, be prepared. Be prepared. You have your recorder, you have your camera, you have whatever you need to gather this information, and be prepared because it may be a while. Sometimes when you talk to older people, they tend to they have to think back, then they have to go forward, and you have to be patient. So be prepared to wait and let them talk. Don't push them. Don't say, now tell me your history. They're going to say, okay, I was born, I'm here, aren't I? I mean, you can't frustrate them. Otherwise, you're not going to get the stories. You're not going to get the things you need. Do your research. Prepare questions. Get that history though. When you do, okay, be prepared. Do your research. When you do your research, when I say research, I'm saying, okay, you have a relative, you know you're here. So slavery ended in 1865. Between 1865 and now, parts of your family were still alive. Of course, some have passed away, but you are endured and you're here, and this is 2021. So you had relatives that lived in 1900s. You had relatives lived in 1918 when there was influenza pandemic, like our virus of today. How did they survive? What did they do? What did they experience? Did they get sick? Did they wear masks? Those are the things. Those are the stories. Those are the rich stories that you want to get. During the Depression, and they had the rations, and and us being African Americans, our history is going to be a little different than what's publicized. Right. Did we get rations? Were our rations recognized? I don't know. So far I haven't talked to anyone in our family that that was alive during that time, and unfortunately, but it wasn't talked about. And so a lot of times we don't talk about those things that are unpleasant, but those are the questions we need to ask. How'd your family survive? We're strong. We survived slavery. How did they survive the Depression? Their polio in 1952, before the vaccine came out in 1955. Was anyone affected? How did you stay away from it? It was a virus. Those things, when I say do the research, know what was going on in the area where your family is before you talk to them. Do your research just so that you can kind of prime them for some information. questions. Some of the questions you can go on Google, and there are questions you can Google questions to ask for research, for genealogy research. And there's sites that give you questions. This is just a few. What was your first home? Where was it? You know, where did you live? Do you know, remember your neighbors? Those neighbors, if you write those down, and when you get to proofing, those neighbors should come up on the census information. And then now you have a story to go with those people. All those things are important. The questions, um, did you have enough food when it was rationed? Just understand, write those questions down so you have them written down, so that you ask them. So you have a base. As far as my own oral history with on my dad's side, as fate would have it, after my mom passed away, that same year or that next summer, we had the family reunion, of course, in Grand Rapids. And some of those relatives I had seen when because we're from Manistee, and some of them I had seen growing up. Some of them I had never seen before, because of course they came after the original group grew up and moved away. But in talking to them, the ones that I knew from being a little girl, the one that I knew was my Aunt Lizzie, who's the one in the red sweater. And then there's her brother, Uncle William, that's sitting on the other side. And in the middle is my baby. That I did that to make sure I would know around the age. But so he got a chance to meet them. And they of course they're past now. My Aunt Lizzie was 100 at that point, when he was got a chance. My son got a chance to meet her. But my Uncle William was, he was in his 80s. But I'd known them growing up, even though Uncle William lived in New Jersey. But I took my book. I was prepared. Didn't know I was prepared. I took my book, our family tree. I walk in there with my book and my pen, and I said, let's talk. And the interesting thing with them is Aunt Lizzie, there were two groups of kids their father had, two sets of children. Aunt Lizzie was the baby of the first set, and Uncle William was the second to the baby in the second set. And they were very close. And between the two of them, they knew, besides their siblings, they knew their siblings' children. They gave me a wealth of information. And I sat with them most of the day, and they enjoyed talking. And my Uncle William was actually at the time our historian for the family. And he was so glad I came along. He said, now I'm passing everything down to you. So our oral history was given to me. And he gave me, of course, they gave me what they needed, but I didn't even know I was doing the right thing. It just happened. So what he gave me, this is a partial list of what he gave me. This is at the top, you'll see Henry, that is their father. And he has his own story. And my Uncle William wrote a book on my great-grandfather's life. And he passed that to me also. Now Henry got married. I don't know if you can see this. Henry got married, and he was a character. He first had Henry Jr., and then he got married, and he married Ella. He married Ella, and then he had these children. Ella died in 1900, right after having Elizabeth. Whoops. And when Elizabeth was a baby, Henry's brother-in-law, Ella's brother, was taking care of Elizabeth. Clara came to help. Clara was Ella's niece. He wound up marrying Clara and having all these children. Now here's Uncle William. Here's Aunt Elizabeth. They're both the youngest. It was second to the youngest, but this thing. Anyway, but it's interesting because if you look at the top, it'll say Mark Comer. Can you see that? Mark Comer and Sarah Henderson. Henry Jr. is by Sarah Henderson. Mark Comer is Ella's brother. A lot of skeletons. Let's put this together. Let's connect the dots. We have first cousins, second cousins, and I'm not sure about Henry yet, what to call them. But Henry's the father of all of these children. And so as I grew and as I began to become more knowledgeable in genealogy, with each one of the sets of children, in the parentheses are their grandchildren or their children that I've talked to or that I know or that I stay in touch with. So out of them, I am able to, we keep up with each other. We have Lena over here. Her name is actually Leah, but they pronounce, that's, you know, how they write names back then. And this is my grandmother, and Alberta and Clara. These three, include my grandmother, which made it 4, were buddies. They were sisters. They were close. When I did my dad's DNA before he died, and Victoria over here showed up. And I got a hold of her and talked to her and told her, and I said, okay, I know you're one of Henry's grandchildren or great grandchildren. So am I. How do you fit in? And she said, oh, you need to talk to my mom, which was Tanya. Tanya and Karen, 2 sisters, which happened to be Lyra's grandchildren. I talked to them on the phone. They were in New Jersey, and they said, we know it's 3 other sisters. I said, 3 other sisters. I said, there's a whole slew of them. It's like 13 kids. They never knew anything about the first set of kids or about Henry, about any of these. They just thought it was just these 3. And then they began to, I talked to them, and they began to wonder, you know, really, I said, I'm going to fly out there. Within a couple of weeks, I flew out there. I didn't want to wait. And in flying out there, they met me, and they were just like me. You would have thought that I've known them all my life. And they are so dear to me now. But the one person that was important that I met was a Mary Elizabeth. And Mary Elizabeth was actually my dad's first cousin. He had never met. They were born the same year. And Mary Elizabeth, we also talked on the phone. She said, I can't wait for you to get here. And I got out there and I just loved her. And she said, I have something for you, which is this picture right here. That picture, this is my grandmother. Nobody in our family has ever seen that picture. She had it. So here's my grandmother right here, but this is her when she was 12, 13. And so she gave me the picture, and she said, the next time you come out, you're going to stay with me. I have a ton of stuff we're going to go through. And so we can put our family information together. And I said, okay. Unfortunately, she passed away a few months after that. So I never got a chance to go through her things, but her 2 nieces, Karen and Tanya, of course, I've kept up with them, and they said, we're waiting for you to come out so we can go through Aunt Elizabeth's things. So I'm just so glad that I was able to do my dad's DNA. And now my dad has passed away, but I have his DNA, and otherwise it would have been lost. Wouldn't have found them. And then so each person on here, this Maud, this is Sammy, this is the gentleman right here. I've known him since I was little. He's of course passed away now, but he used to tell me stories. And I don't know why, but I always got the stories. But so far in most of the families, there's 3 families I have information from, because this woman right here, my cousin Patty, I talked to her. She lives in New Jersey. She's in the first group. And then I knew Ella, but Ella died. But it's so far I know I'm getting information from both sides of the sets of children. Oh, let me get back to New Jersey. When I got to New Jersey, I talked to them. I said, you guys do realize there's other relatives in New Jersey? And they were like, no. Got a hold of them. We all had a mini reunion, and come to find out, some of them from New Jersey knew the other ones just from working together or going to school together, to know that they were cousins. And they said, Joyce, you're bringing our family together. And I said, no, I was just privileged to be with Uncle William and Aunt Lizzie, and they gave me information. I said, so now, we're pulling the family together. Although they meet, parts of them meet every year, but some of them were left out. So oral history, these are the ones I met. This is the family right here is the family, part of the family. This is Uncle William's family that was in New Jersey that they didn't know existed. This is Mary Elizabeth right here. She's the daughter of Clara, my grandmother's youngest sister. And in August, it was August 2017 in New Jersey that we brought the families together. Awesome. We had an awesome time. Oops. And then when Mary Elizabeth died that December, they of course had a homecoming, but look at the people that I didn't know existed. And that's not even all of them. That was just that picture that they sent. Okay, let's get into written records. Written records, they start with you. You start with you and you work backwards. You start with what you know. So you write down, of course, your basic information, your children, your spouse. Then you go to your parents and you write down what you know about your parents. You'd be surprised at things people don't know about their parents, or their grandparents. Because people just didn't share, or they just don't share, and your grandparents' children. And so you start by what you know, and then you document the data. And there's forms. There's four major forms: individual detailed sheets, there's a family group sheet, and the ancestral sheet, and a source sheet. And we'll go through each one of those because they're all important, and that forms the foundation of your history book about you. An individual worksheet. Now there's there's a lot of different versions, and some are more detailed than others. You can go online and see the vast majority of the differences, but this is just some examples. And of course it asks for the name, the vital information, where they're born, the mother and father's name, and those things. And as you go through and do the research, and this is filled out, you're going to go through and you're going to proof this information to make sure that what's on your paper is correct. And you're going to find out why later. And then you're going to do with family group sheet. Family group sheet has, when I do this class, we normally start with the 4-generational, chart. And it requires that the family group sheets be created. You have to have something to write the information down on. Otherwise, you can write them in books. And I do that also when I go through and find things. But for a foundation, because people will come to you and say, that's wrong, especially in your family. Oh, no, that's wrong. Oh, no, I heard this or I heard that. And you pull your little paper out and you say, no, this is this. And I'm going to show you why I know it's right, because I've done a source sheet. This is where I've got it from, the legal vital data that is supplied by the government. And some people, they go by what, no, grandma said is she was born on the 15th. No, she was actually born on the 14th. And she was born at home. So I have the document. So, but nonetheless, those, you need to fill those out and have them filled out the best that you can. And you'll fill them in as you go, but you need some things to start with. Proofing. This is a whole big thing. Basically, what it says is what I just said. It makes you go through and you look the data up to make sure it's correct, to make sure so that before you put it online or before you share it, so that misinformation isn't passed around. You can go on Ancestry or some of these websites, and they'll say, oh, we have the family tree to blah, blah, blah's family. Well, then you look at it and you say, wait a minute, that's my family. No, I wasn't born in 32. I'm only 15 or whatever. Some of the mistakes that are made, be it errors or because they've gotten the wrong data offline, and they make it sound like the Bible. So you need to prove what you look up. Make sure it's right so that you have the right information and you're not passing along wrong information. So you don't make the data fit you, you make sure the data fits your family. So here's an example. This is just a mock-up family group sheet. At the top, you see up here, this is my grandfather. His name is Theodore. And my grandmother, her name is Esther Joyce. And then I just listed some of my parents, my mom's siblings. And here's my mom down here. And some of the family group sheet has pictures. I just put it on to kind of, because I like the pictures. And this is her brother, Herbert. Now, I take this information and I go into the online, and I put in my mom's information. Say I'm on Ancestry, and I put the information in, and I put her name, and I wasn't sure if you could see over here, so I kind of made it larger on the one side. But I put in some basic information. You don't have to fill the whole thing in. You can put in a couple things and see what comes up. You may get 1,000 hits, but you want to narrow it down so it's not so much. But you put the information in, and then you go and hit, and you're gonna come up with a list of the people that have the same name in the same state, and at that same time for that same census, and you're gonna say, which one is right? How do I choose it? You pull out your handy dandy family group sheet, and I started with the first one. I know my mom, I know which one is right, but if you don't know, and you're guessing with those siblings things, I brought up this first one, and this is when she was 5 years old, and she was, of course, single. And this is my grandmother and grandfather's address. We've known that address like our own. And then you go into the household members. Oh yeah, these names. These are my aunts and my uncles. This is my mom. I can verify that this is my mom. Let me back up. I can verify this is my mom, but this information is a limited amount. It just kind of gives a overview of my mom. I can go back, see this up here. This is the actual census record itself. And when I click view, this bottom one is what comes up. Of course, it's the neighbors and everything. I just kind of pared it down a tad, but there's also online I'm doing 1940 census, a blank 1940 census, so that I can see the questions that they asked, that the census taker asked for that particular year. So in that data, it gave how much my grandfather made. All those things will go, you can put on your individual sheets. That's where you get the information for your individual sheets, the information that you need to fill in. But it takes the bones and it kind of puts meat on the information. And you find out the place of birth. You find out, in this particular one, you find out how much they made. You find out the color, of course, if they could read, if they could write, what their status was, because some people weren't necessarily legally married. They were partners. Some of them you'll look, and the person will look older. They're 25 and the man is 65, and it's like he married a woman that young. And then you look in the details for relationship, it says, oh, that's his daughter. Oh, this is my niece. This is my granddaughter. So it specifies what the relationship is of the family. And a lot of families stayed together longer, and they stayed in the same household and share and pooled their money. So that gives you information about your family for the 1940. And you take those individual sheets and you fill out each person's individual sheet.
Joyce, I've had trouble with going in there, and it really sometimes depends on the census taker's handwriting.
Oh yeah, and that's what
I've got our name spelt so many different ways, or A looks like an E, and then it goes into the database that way. How do you go back and change that?
Oh, they now before they wouldn't let you change it, and now when it goes through Ancestry or more goes through Family Search, all you have to do is contact them and say this is an error, and they will make an error note.
Okay.
They now but they didn't used to do that, and now they do. In fact, there was an error note on when I got married, and my last name, I went from Daniels to Annuals, ANLS. And I asked my husband, I said, do you know you're not married to me? You need to find this person. But yeah, they make mistakes all the time because they're human. And the census takers at that time were actually official federal. And then after a while, they started using regular people, hired in regular people for that season. And if they couldn't talk to the family, they would talk to the neighbors. They were on a quota. So, sometimes the years are off. where, you know, it may say like my mom is 5, she could have been actually 3. But that's when you pull out your form and you know, oh, she was born at this is when her birthday is. So, you know, sometimes you have to go, it's a 2-3 year difference. But yeah, it's not gospel because they're human. Now some of the vital records, some of the actual government records are death certificates, birth certificates, deeds, those type of things. Though these are county, but I mean, or state, but these things, they're records of life events that are kept under government authority. That includes birth certificates, like marriage licenses, separation or divorce certificates, death certificates. And you know, there's errors with all of them also, especially when they were home births. If you look down at the bottom down here, this dark one, it says that's my Uncle Herbert's birth certificate. And it says his name is Baby Boy. He was born at home. And they had not given him his name yet. So they did the form, but they hadn't figured out his name because they had lost a couple children and their other son. And so before they gave him his name, they wanted to make sure, I guess, he was going to survive. But and he still talked about it until he died. You know, my name is really Baby Boy. And we would just laugh at him. And so they make changes throughout the forms. Bear with me. Anyway, they make changes throughout the forms, and as you go through, I was trying to show throughout the years, from the death certificates, like this death certificate says this is of my grandfather's mother. It listed that who her husband was, that he had died. It listed a lot of detailed things. Then when her son, my grandfather, died, it said widowed. It listed some things, but it didn't say, it just said widowed, didn't say who he was married to. It said it just is, each year it seems like they take some of the details out of it that you would have had, some of the facts. By the time my uncle died, they started adding social security numbers to it. But they took out if he was widowed, separated, who was he married to? Which was in my grandfather's, in my great grandmother's information. So they changed the data that they put on them, but the data is only as good as the informant.
Yeah.
There we go.
Okay.
Now we're cooking with grease. All right.
I have a question whenever
Yes.
you get a
Nope.
chance.
I'm open.
So I have my grandmother. There's an interesting story, just like I heard what you were saying about your family, just interesting story. But she was a twin. And they were sent to Ohio at 6 years old on a train because their parents had passed away, and the older brothers and sisters were already in Ohio. And with a brown paper bag name tag, they were pinned. A neighbor that I grew up next to me actually remembers seeing them. They came up on this train. She has other siblings or cousins. I think they're cousins.
Okay.
Who at one time were taken into like what we called Sean Acres, or it was the home for orphans. And so I'm wondering, now we're talking way back. This would have been, I mean, she was born in 1914, I think. And so this would be in the 20s. This
Okay.
would be in the 20s. Do those records, is there any way to capture those records? Do those records still exist from the 20s?
Mhm.
Go ahead.
It depends on the organization, and it kind of might depend on the ethnics, the race. Um, the reason I say that, you can, oh my gosh, you can go on, you can Google. Did you try and Google the name of the orphanage? Okay. Google, you'd be surprised. Google has a wealth of information, and you can literally Google, like you can Google how to make a car. You can Google orphanage and put the name in records. Now, all of them might not be, they might not be, found these results. They might not be, um, they might not be where you can see them, but you can write and get the information that you need. Because a lot of those records, they people doing genealogy, it's become dollar signs for some people, and they'll say, oh, I have these records, this is going to be worth some money, because people are doing genealogy and they're looking at dollars and cents. All of them, no, they don't do that, but some of them do. But Google it, you'd be surprised. Because they're on Ancestry. When you go into card catalog and put in orphanage, you'd be surprised the information that come up, the different names of different orphanages. Mind you, most of them are for people that don't look like us, but there are a lot of information out there with names. Some of the details might not be there that you're looking for. They might not have enough details. You can go into prisons. You can put prisons on there and find out if your relative was in prison from back in the day. It goes as far as back into the 1900s. You can find information. Sometimes they'll give you, if you want information, write this company. Look, Google it. Google it. I'd be interested to find out. Let me know what you find. I can help too.
I thought about you when you said that your uncle, I believe it was Baby Boy or Baby Bro, because I met those three sisters. I know who they were. The last one has passed away. So these are cousins. These would have been first cousins of my grandmother. And they, up into their 70s and 80s, talked about how none of the other relatives took them in.
That's surprising.
They had to go over there and live there. I don't even know how long it was. I don't know whether it was 6 months, a year, 2 years, whatever it
Sometimes
was.
the state would do that and take the children, depending on, I have in our family, one of Henry's daughters died, and her children had to go to they went to an orphanage, and then they went into a foster home. Because for African, they still had the racial divide, and they weren't having money for orphanages for African American children. So they either went to work camps, they sent them and became workers. That happened on my mom's side too. One of them, her parents died, and they sent her to basically be a slave for a family, and she was the babysitter, and that she paid her way to be there by being the slave and taking care of the children. And she was young. She was 12 years old. But a lot of them, as time went on, they wound up like Henry wound up when he went and he said, my grandkids will not be in an orphanage. And he went to court, and he got legal custody and raised them up in Manistee. So can you hear me? Okay, I can't hear you. I can't hear you guys.
Oh, I'm muted. I just muted so that,
Okay. But anyway, but yeah, Google has a vast majority of information. I'm running out of time. Let me rush through the rest of these. There we go. Okay. So then I found out who my mom was. And so when I went to go do the pedigree chart, I was able to put in that information, what's on the inside the triangle. That's just to let you guys know that that information is proofed. I know my mom. I know her mother and father's information is correct because I proofed it. And of course I know mine is correct. And then, but I haven't not done my dad's. I mean, on this is my dad's side's not done, but within that triangle, that's correct. So then when you get into sourcing is documenting what you have found. Where'd you get it? So that if you have to go back to it, you can find it, because the internet can be a lost generation. It could be the Bermuda Triangle. You can find something in the picture or whatever, and you go back to it, you can't find it. Write it down. People can ask you about it, and you'll say, I don't know where I got that. If you can't prove it, it's not any good. So you have to source it. You got to put down your source, and you get your sources. Like, here's my mom's Social Security application. Here's the source information. Ancestry gives you that information so that you can get back to it. You could be at the National Archives, and you can bring this up, because without putting in information, it'll give you numbers, and you put that database information in, and it'll come up. So make sure you have a sheet and you source your finds. Here's the sheet, and I always usually keep mine in the back of my book, so that I can write it down, or sometimes I write it right on the side of it. But make your notes. Here's some popular genealogy sites that you can go into. Some of them cost, some of them don't. Some of them will give you limited information, but the National Archives is a very good one. Ancestry, of course, it costs like $100 every 6 months. But when you get into genealogy, you're going to want to have, the cost is not going to matter when you really get into it. Then you have Family Search, which is free, and the Mormons actually provide that. And then Heritage costs, and Google is free. Google, just like you Google anything else, absolutely wonderful. On the National Archives in Google Family Search, here's some of the blank forms that you can, the links, and as you go through, and you'll say, man, I need another family group sheet. National Archives has a form thing on there, and you can click on it. Some of them are interactive, so you can fill out the information right online and then print it off. Any more questions? No? Here is my contact information and my email.
I think Rhonda has a question.
Oh,
yes, thank you. I was trying to look for the raise my hand thing.
Oh, I didn't know it was somebody else on here. I can't see anybody else. Okay, hi.
Hi, I'm Rhonda. I'm calling in from Toronto. I'm originally from New York, but I lived in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
And my mom's side is all done. One of my mother's cousins, my mother's side is from Delaware, and I know I'm going to find I'm related to George in here someplace, because she did the whole family. But I'm trying to do my dad's side now, and we started it on Ancestry like 5 or 10 years ago, and it's just all messed up. It's got to get cleaned up. Looking at it is frightening to me.
Okay.
But I know that my mom's cousin told me, like, the 1860 census, or one of those censuses, like there was a fire. I don't know if it just
fire. There's no way to find this.
Everything's missing. I don't know if that is for every state or
that is national. Yes, they do not. And you know what? Let me make that correction. They a small segment of it did survive, but it's the majority of the people. There's no information for us. It might be some in there, but it's the what is it? It's not the 18. I can't remember, because we never. It's before 1900. Is 1870, 80. I think it might have 1880. But whichever the year it is, I can't, off the top of my head right now, I'm pulling a blank of which year, because we just bypass it because we know. But there is some information out there. But it's very small. Very small.
Yeah, I'm trying to get these little stories from people, and I'm finding out there's they know they're skeleton people that, children that didn't know of each other but found out later, but no, they don't know each other. But I wanted to, it's like I look at that messed up page and it just like, I don't know where to
But
start.
when you say messed up, what do you mean messed up? I'm not
It's
understanding.
like
that.
there's like on Ancestry, there's like 3 or 4 different boxes with my name as family tree, and then the information is different, like it got filled in there, several different.
Okay, so you're talking about 3 different people did trees on Ancestry, and they have different information.
Well, they all say my name, like the 3 different trees, and some of the information is, I'm like, how do I clean this up? No idea.
Have you contacted Ancestry?
No,
Who
maybe
did?
I should do
But wait a minute. Who is the author of the trees?
It must have been me, and it's a long time ago, so I don't recall how.
I would
Like I-
contact them. I would contact them and tell them what you're attempting to do, and that there's misinformation you'd like to have them erased, and then you can start all over.
Yeah, maybe that's.
That's what I would do. How quickly that happens, I'm not sure. That's a new one on me. I mean, but there are trees out there that are so that are, there's mistakes in them, and people don't want to correct them because they think their information is right. So it's kind of like a school board. I look at it as a school board, and I look at it as a tool of a confirmation for what I find. You can't go by those trees anyway.
I know that, I think my family tree, I want to say I know they sent me something. They'll send you a email or something if there are contradictions. And they say, well, we've got about 100 contradictions in your family tree. And
Yep.
it might be a date. It might be, well, this guy's an uncle. He can't be an uncle because he's younger than this guy. And, they send out all this stuff. And a lot of times, if you run it through them, they'll merge it all for you, or they'll at least let you know where the actual mistakes are.
But isn't Family Tree, that's a paid,
Yeah, I think,
paid
I
site.
don't know, what's the other one? My
Heritage.
Heritage.
My Heritage is also a paid one now, because the library, we don't have it anymore. They don't have it in the library anymore.
One of those two.
Oh, wait a
I
minute, My
know.
Heritage got bought out.
Oh,
So they got bought out, I think, by Ancestry. I tried to find them because we used to have them, and they don't have it anymore. It's called Heritage. They changed the name. But anyway, they're yeah. And some of the issues come up with where when you look at how the census will say this is so and so, they're 5 this year. 10 years from now, this is so and so, they're actually 17, and the dates don't match up. And so when they go on to the information goes in, it's like, is this your relative? You know how they do the little leaves, and you're like, yeah, but that birthday is wrong. So that's why I was telling you that it's hard to go by those trees, especially if you didn't do it and it didn't get proved.
And you said Ancestry is like $100 per 6 months or something like
Yeah,
that.
they have an introductory, and they pull you in because they know once you get in there, you're gonna want to keep it.
Well, my dad sent us kids DNA kits for a Christmas gift. So
Oh, that's awesome.
we got in there that way.
Right, but that's still only temporary.
right.
Once
So
that the trial period is over with, you can no longer, you can pull your information up with your DNA, but you can no longer pull the census and all that other stuff up.
yeah, well, I never pulled that, and my cousin told me, don't do the pay version until you do all your paper, because you may not have to pay for it several times. If you have all your stuff and you can get it all in there, you may have all the stuff you
Yep.
need.
A lot of information though.
Yeah.
There's a little minimum amount of time, and the other sad thing about Ancestry, although because it's paid and they are doing a lot of new things, they have they kind of hold you over a barrel when you do your DNA also, because you can go back and look at it, but I don't know, they have limitations on things on their things also. And then they have now recently eliminated the small centimorgans that they used to provide on the DNA test. And those small centimorgans are actually the smaller the smaller the number goes back further in your family history. So instead of being able to pull from 1865, they're going to give you your DNA information from, let's say, 1830. I mean 1930. That's just an example. It's a wide range, but the smaller centimorgans, I never get the word right, are from are your DNA from your ancestors back by slavery. And they're not telling you that. And they eliminated it.
Since Ron is here, I'll also make a good statement too. Ron is in Toronto, and I've gotten a lot of genealogy, even recently from somebody who's doing some research in our family. There's this whole movement where slaves moved to Chatham, which is, they call it online Canada West.
Mhm.
And I think they are online, but I don't think Ancestry has that information. But it's a wealth of information. I know I have relatives there because this other guy told me I did, and but I've never been able to access anything that can get me that census information from Canada.
You know,
There
we
were
did that,
6
George.
towns.
George, we did that last year. We had a class on, and I had there's a woman, 2 women from Ann Arbor. They do the Underground Railroad and searching theirs, and it winds up in Canada and how they got it. And in fact, there's a movie too called The Book of Negroes.
Oh
yeah.
yeah, yep.
Yeah, there's also a documentary show, and I didn't know that there were 6 towns in Ontario that were set aside for slaves that came over.
Mhm.
And then the Nova Scotia, which that was the Book of Negroes. But they have a lot of information. Well, Black History Month over here, I was surprised there's a lot of stuff because there's so many Jamaicans and Caribbean people over here.
Right. Don't they have their own little area?
No, well, I mean, they're mixed in with everybody, but because
Okay.
this was the British Empire, they were part of the British Empire. But there's a lot of Black history stuff this month over here right now.
Yeah, there was a
Shows.
documentary. There was a documentary I just watched. I can't
Mhm.
even remember, and they talked about that. And geez, what was the name of that?
Yeah,
It was
there's
awesome.
a lot of stuff.
About exactly what you're saying. Awesome.
Are you,
Awesome.
the Long Song, are you talking about that one?
What was it?
The Long Song? That was
can't
kind of like a historical fiction.
Right,
About-
right. And you know what? That might have been it, but it was awesome. It
Yeah.
opened my eyes to a whole new perspective of Canada. And I mean, I knew about the Nova Scotia, whatever, but I didn't understand that they had a whole thing on that group of people.
Yeah, there were 6 towns, and there's one town right across from Detroit that my friend Sharon over there would take kids to. There's a town right on the other side of the water.
That's where we need to be going, George. We need to have a group of people and go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We need road
Oh,
trip.
Yeah, that's a definitely good road trip right
Oh
there.
yeah, she used to bring kids over here all the time from Grand Rapids, I think from the Baxter.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I'll email you some stuff. Well, we'll communicate, because maybe once this thing is all over, you can bring some people over.
Oh, that would be.
Because the town's still there.
Oh, that would be fantastic.
Well, Joyce, we appreciate your class. We have agreed to do this about 3 more times this year.
This has been fun. I enjoy it.
Yeah, Bay, you're muted. You're muted.
I'm so used to being in meetings where they keep telling everybody to mute their mics,
I
and I'm
know.
like scared because all of the background noise.
No, I was
I
just saying, we appreciate Joyce and all the information you give us. We're going to do this 3 more times this year at least. And we're going to be really organizing some of these trips we talked about. There's a great group of people here doing research kind of underground, as Joyce says. The West Michigan Genealogist Society is okay, but they don't get to the nuts and bolts of Black history and Black genealogy like we do. And so we want to kind of do it on our own and maybe find our own resources to make some things happen here. So definitely stay in touch with the museum. We'll be posting it as we get closer to that. And Joyce, do you have anything else you want to add?
No, I have my contact information if I can be of any help, or if you're looking to participate or share information of activity that you know that somebody we might like want to get involved with. I just want to share what you found, your joy. Contact me by email. Just be patient, because I do genealogy and it is a lot. But I just thank you guys for inviting me. I've had a ball. Look forward to the next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Yeah.
Rhonda, nice seeing you again.
Yep, I'll stay in touch.
Okay, all right then. Thank you all for coming today.
Yep.